Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Good morning. Get woke. Ladies and gentlemen, MIP is COVID free. Free meaning you don't need a subscription to MIP every day now for a limited time. While we endure this pandemic, we want to make it available to everyone. So wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, MIP is COVID free and available to you and everyone without a subscription. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very special guest joining us. Even though he's a regular, he's still very, very special to me. He founded something called the Progressive Review in 1964, and his motto is the news while there's still time to do something about it. He's a wordsmith in that he's published several books, including The Great American Repair Manual, and he's a songsmith in that he's a musician. And you know him by his very famous name because he's won an Oscar and a Grammy, waiting on that Emmy and that Tony. He's world renowned in that regard. His name is Sam Smith. And once again, he joins us from Maine.
Everybody, it's Sam Smith.
Who I found is Sam Smith. Hello.
Sam Smith, everyone. Sam Smith's album's called In the Lonely Hour. #1 on iTunes.
He is on everybody's one-to-watch list for 2014.
Give it up for Sam Smith.
Sam Smith coming up right after this.
It was a Monday night when you told me it was over, babe.
Hey man, how are you? How you and Kathy doing in this pandemic, in this shelter?
Well, we're doing real well. It's a wonderful place to be isolated.
Yeah,
And
it is.
make 1 or 2 trips into town a week. I have a pick up of groceries at 4:00 this afternoon, and haven't been there since last Friday.
Okay. So you probably are enjoying sheltering in Maine more than you would have enjoyed it had you still been in DC, I take it.
Oh yeah. And I worry about people, say, in New York City like you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for worrying about me. I'm worried about me too.
How are you doing?
We're good. I mean, fortunately,
How's your son doing?
he's great. He's great. You know, I never, there was a time when I did not take it seriously. We came home on the 13th, didn't really go anywhere else after that. But a few days later, when the refrigeration trucks were coming in town and they showed them going across my television screen, it shook me up. And I saw how real this was. And then I had a friend or two who basically tried to convince me that even staying in New York was a death sentence. But, it was too late to go anywhere. So we've just been hunkered down. We've been fine. Been doing a lot of praying, obviously. But so far, so good. So
Well, that's good.
we're grateful. We're grateful.
Good.
What are the numbers? Have Maine's numbers in general gotten bad at all? Sam, do we know?
Maine's numbers are, glad you asked me that. We have had a total of 937 cases reported, as opposed to you all that have had 263,000 cases.
Yeah.
And we have a death rate of about 3.9,
Okay.
which is also below New York by considerable.
Well, I mean, everybody's below New York, but I mean, those are still not ideal numbers for Maine. I guess they could be a lot worse.
No. And a lot of those are in nursing homes and in old people's homes,
Mhm.
and that's something which I don't think has been enough attention paid for, because a lot of these nursing homes are owned by big corporations, and it makes you wonder how well they're taking care of the people.
Yeah. That's kind of that's pretty scary, as a matter of fact. Also good not to be in Washington because so Trump wants us to ingest things we should not ingest and shine light through us or something, expose ourselves to light and radiation.
Yeah, and I sent you a photograph of a guy following his word and using a straw and a bottle of Clorox. I don't think he was actually sucking it in. I think he was making a comment, but it was pretty striking.
Somebody, literally while we're talking, somebody just texted me a picture of Clorox chewables.
Clorox chewables.
But Sam, you know, the light part, you know where that's coming from, right?
The light part
Having the light go.
No, I don't.
What does he do every day? He sits in that tanning bed.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying? So for him, you know, he's dealing with. So he probably what he couldn't say. What he probably wanted to say was, if you all would just sit in the tanning bed every day like me, you could burn that thing away. But you know,
I missed that entirely. That's a good one.
You see it now, don't you? I mean,
yeah,
that's his.
I just got so wrapped up in the Lysol and the Clorox.
Yeah. And so I was watching Andrea Mitchell, and she was defending Dr. Birx and suggesting that Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci are just trying to hang in there for the good of the country. Does that wash with you? Is that acceptable to you?
I think they do a pretty good job. They have these very limited faces they put on every once in a while.
Yeah.
But
could you do that?
Huh?
Could you stomach that? Could you sit up under him like that every day?
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But you know, it's Dr. Fauci is certainly better than whoever Trump would replace him with.
Yeah. We're at a moment when we need to be talking more about public health, don't we?
A lot more. And I recently wrote a piece about this because it has occurred to me, really, one of the hardest things to cover in news is things that don't get covered.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody talks about it and you don't think about it. And public health is one of those things. Just to give you a little idea, we spend $619 billion a year on our military, as opposed to $12 billion for the Centers on Disease Control.
Yeah.
And we're right now close to the total death rate of Americans in the Korean War.
Yeah. Well, and there's 50,000 at this point. By next week, there'll be more deaths than were in Vietnam, won't there?
Could be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was Vietnam? 54,000?
Let's see.
Something like that?
Something like that. No, I think it was more than that. Vietnam
was okay?
90,000.
Oh, 90,000. Okay.
Korea was 53,000.
Okay, I'm sorry. You said Korea. I got. Yeah. I don't know why I thought Korea was less and Vietnam was only 54. But I mean, we're going to hit those numbers.
Yeah, and right now, we're already more people have died in this virus in just a few months than commit suicide in this country in a whole year.
Wow.
And
wow.
We're up to over the half of the Vietnam War total. But one of the problems is that, you can, from a political point of view, you can go around and tell people, we got to prepare ourselves for the Russians or the Iranians or the Chinese, and you get billions of dollars that are funded. But nobody talks about something like strokes or heart attacks or viruses.
Yeah. And it should be talked about. In your article, you mentioned, am I reading this correctly, a conversation between your senator and Barack Obama? After I found this from 2009.
Yeah, Senator Collins, she didn't have Yeah, she said that after meeting with Mr. Obama back in 2009, Senator Collins expressed concern about a number of spending provisions, including 780 million for pandemic flu preparedness. So she was concerned about spending that amount, and that was what was that, roughly 1% of the military budget.
What's she saying about the pandemic these days from Maine? Has she been saying anything intelligent?
Well, I've been trying not to follow her because
And her numbers underwater too, aren't they? She's in trouble, isn't
well,
she?
she could be in trouble. It's an interesting thing for pollsters. I think are really in trouble right now because they don't have really solid information on how people are going to react.
Mm-hmm.
We can only speculate and guess, and I'm not great on speculation.
Biden fears that Trump may even try to postpone the election.
Yeah, well, that's and
Can he do?
there've been some sort of thought that Trump's dissatisfaction with the post office and their reports that he wants to turn that into a privatized operation,
Yeah.
and that one reason he doesn't want this to be voting by mail is because he doesn't want the post office to become that important.
That's yeah. So in addition to not wanting people to vote, period,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't want the post office to become so essential again, or continue to be perceived as so essential. That's a good point. That's a very good point. That's very, very interesting. I would disagree with Biden. I think it's less likely he'll try to postpone, and more likely that they'll just hold it, even if people can't vote. That's been the consistent behavior of Trump in the Supreme Court, Bush in the Supreme Court. Yeah, you have an election, but if there's a way for people not to vote in that election, they'll say, well, it's just too bad.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what the Supreme Court did in Wisconsin. They kind of came down that way, which is, I mean, and it's scary. It's scary. Now, the individual states, if I'm not mistaken, it's up to them. They have their own voting systems.
Sure.
They can, and legislatures and governors can make absentee ballots universally available right now. I know there's legislation that what spoke Kamala Harris the other day. There's legislation to give states more money to do that. States have the power to do that, but McConnell's wrong, Sam. States don't really have the power to declare bankruptcy, do they?
Well, no, that was one of the more wildly stupid things that have been said in the last few days. And your governor got right on the case. And the thing that I found really interesting was the point that he made that according to Cuomo, Cuomo wrote on Twitter that it takes $148 billion more in federal funding than in Kentucky. Kentucky takes $148 billion more in federal funding than it contributes, whereas New York contributes much more than it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another example. It's an interesting problem to have so many people in high positions telling things that aren't true. I mean, I can't think of a time in my life that was the case. I mean, there would be individuals who would do it, but they sort of.
That's called the Russian strategy of the fog of unknowability.
Unknowability, right?
and it's purposeful. It's just a fog. So we're talking about war. We're talking about Vietnam. Just fog.
Right.
So he's encouraging the governor of Georgia to reopen Georgia. Then he says he shouldn't reopen Georgia. I mean, that is not so random. Use light, use bleach, just everything is just creates a lot of chaos and confusion. Nobody knows what's what, up from down, left from right. The fog of unknowability.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I wonder about is in terms of the reaction to it. Do you react by simply providing the true facts, or is there some way that you can make Trump seem as foolish as he is? I mean, in a way, I think MSNBC is doing Trump a favor by broadcasting his collection of untruths every day.
Well, everybody is. Everybody's broadcasting those things.
And I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
No, I think it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing they could do right now. But
Well, the other thing, Sam, and I mentioned this to you the last time we talked, I'll remind you, because I think it needs to be said again anyway. One, Carol Simpson's theory about this being a way for him to preempt local news, to keep them from reporting what's really going on. That's one. But two, some of our fellow journalists and their agencies and organizations like to be there to cover it and do not mind getting into a row with Trump because that helps their visibility and the possibility of them going viral and getting likes and looks and clicks. So in other words, it's like you and I would go there for the purpose of being lambasted by him. And then we would go viral. We would get more likes from it.
right.
You know,
Right.
and someone very credible told me that, and I hadn't thought about it before, but when they said it, I was like, wow, and it was horrifying. And there are a couple of news organizations, not MSNBC, but there are others whom I think that you and I still have some respect for that actually are doing that. They are going there and being called upon and have no problem with it turning into something ugly. Because you still get something from that. You get clicks, and then nowadays, when you and I were learning this craft, the pen was mightier than the sword. Nowadays, the click is mightier than the sword.
That's right. That's right.
And that's not good, Sam.
But it's an interesting problem of how do you handle, say, on a personal basis, if you were run into Trump today in a bar, how would you handle him?
First of all, he's the kind of character I think the average person wants to avoid.
Right.
You know, you walk in a bar, you gravitate toward certain people gravitate toward you. I don't think anybody gravitates toward him. No one ever did. Other than the fact he was on television and people like celebrity, but I don't think there's a lot of evidence a lot of people wanted to hang out with him in the first place.
Yeah. Do you just turn your back on him and walk away?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing.
What are you thinking? What would you do?
No,
Would you try to talk to
I
him?
don't know. I really don't have a good handle on it. But I do think that as for starters, that the TV network should stop covering fully those news pseudo news operations that
Agreed.
Trump is
Agreed.
in.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
Because
Wholeheartedly
you
agree.
see, the one of the problems, and I found this increasingly true when I was covering Washington, that people confuse power with the news. That if the news is something that comes from people in power, and just as
and solely,
yeah.
So yeah, that you're not producing news and providing news if you aren't talking to an elected official exclusively or some type of celebrity.
Right.
That's the era of the click, though, Sam.
Yeah.
How many clicks can I get talking to this person? I give you an example. Recently, someone was trying to get scheduled on the show, and I don't always exercise editorial rights on guests. I talk to a grapefruit. I've always felt, an interview is challenging me. So if Brittany books for me to interview a grapefruit, I'm going to give it a crack and make it interesting. But this was an individual. Last time the individual came on, he created a lot of clickbait and created a lot of drama on the show. It was really uncalled for. I could have done without it. But I was at still a Sirius XM at the time, and everybody loved it because it was clicks, clicks, and views.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really kind of silly.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any sense. If someone had said, leave this on the cutting room floor, I would have done it.
Yeah.
Person wanted to come back on the show, and I was like, I really don't need to do that again. I mean, I've been there, done that. I got the clicks from you. I don't need anything else foolish.
Yeah, and there are a lot of stories. I mean, the example of the story I wrote about public health, which I, among other people, have covered far too little. But that's a story that lacks people in power.
Yeah.
And so it just isn't as interesting. I would just like to say, in my defense, I hope that you'll treat me as a clementine and not as a grapefruit.
No, well, you're neither, Sam. You're much more. But you get my point. I mean, that's
No,
just
absolutely. And I was an anthropology major, and one of the things I find interesting when I look back on what I've done in life is I constantly go and look at the news from the point of view of things that don't have big names attached to it. Well, what's really going on there, culturally?
right.
How are things changing? What neighborhoods are doing X and what aren't, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, which is, and I think that was sort of the way I was raised to think about journalism at that time. I think that the infatuation with power really had a lot to do with the rise of television.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, but television's been around a long. I think I really would want that's something worth considering, to go back and really find out the moment that, because I can't even say that was the case with Reagan, because in the Reagan administration you still had journalists who were challenging the White House. I'm wondering, when did that really begin to change, where journalists were no longer, you know what, honestly, Sam, I think we could probably go back and look at the advent of the internet itself.
Yeah.
Once online media began to supplant television and print, and you could see, before, television could hide behind the wall strictly, well, not so much hiding, but they were confined to the calculus of ratings.
Mhm.
But you didn't always get all those details. You kind of got an idea what ratings were, and who cared, right? The advertisers did. That was it.
Right.
But now, with the internet, people, you and I can actually see how many views someone is getting, how many, and then people judge on that, which I also think is a bit unfair, because some things get 1 million views. I don't understand why. I think every conversation you and I have should get 1 million views. We say some darn interesting things, and we're two charming gentlemen. But that's just how it is. So I think if we go back to the internet and the whole click culture, click, 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 we can probably find where access. I remember thinking too how much the tide had changed when Bob Woodward was covering the Bush White House, and he was writing these hagiography books until he got into trouble because the war was coming about, and then he had to go and kind of change. He had all these notes about the run up to the war and lack of justification, but he didn't want to publish it because he wanted to keep access. I mean, everybody else said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Then he pulled out his notes. Yeah, this is what they were really doing. Well, Bob, you didn't tell us that at first because you wanted to stay and have access so you could get the clickbait. So that's the state of John. I mean, I didn't mean to go off into a whole lecture, but I'll admit that.
And I think the other thing is that, going back further, is that before television, politicians were judged based on what the community thought about them that they served. I mean, that's where their base was. And they had to keep those people happy. They had to do things for them. And even if they were corrupt, you find, say, with the corrupt mayors of that period, they also did good things for their people. And then with television, it became much, much more just an image thing, so that you didn't know, you didn't even have to do history. And I really stumbled across this when I got into the covering the Clinton story from the Arkansas angle. And I realized that nobody was interested in what happened in Arkansas, but it was fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's too local.
it was considered too local, and the fact that
No, it was Arkansas. I mean,
Arkansas
people
was
don't.
one of the 3 or 4 biggest drug importation states. I mean, at one point I got an email complaining about something I'd written by Billy Bear Bottoms, and I said, "Oh my God, Billy Bear Bottoms was the pilot for Barry Seal, the biggest drug importer in the country."
Yeah, Tom
That-
Cruise.
And that was Arkansas, but Arkansas wasn't important enough to people in Washington.
Yeah, yeah. ProRev.com, folks, since 1964, the news, while it's still time to do something about it. So you guys watching good movies lately?
Oh, we're watching a lot of good stuff. Our current favorite, I think, is Better Places series on Amazon Prime.
Okay, I haven't seen that. I have to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something actually came on Turner Classic Movies on television, real television, late one night. And I happened to catch it. Hadn't seen it in years. Hadn't seen it so long, I've forgotten parts of it. But the movie Claudine with Diane Carroll, who recently passed, and James Earl Jones.
Is that right?
And it was great. Yeah, and the soundtrack was done by Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Huh, huh.
So
That's great.
it was a classic. Yeah, it was good to see that again. It was good to see it again. Well, so you're going to the grocery store. How's that? So what's that like? Still the same people? You wear a mask when you go now?
Well, actually, I don't get out of the car.
That's right. That's right. They bring it to you.
Yeah, you call them, and then they bring you the bags, and it all works out very well.
Good. Good.
And the
Good.
only other reason I go to town these days is once a week to recycle.
Ah, okay. So they don't, where you live, they don't pick up the recycling?
Just the trash.
Oh, really?
You have a guy who picks up the trash. It's not
So
the
you have
town.
to,
You have to pay for it.
is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. You have to pay for the trash to be picked up.
Right.
That's different.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What is that? So that's just, is that how it is in a lot of small towns? You
Oh
gotta,
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
so I learned something. I didn't know that.
But one of the
Okay.
nice things is that people in a small town also are very friendly, and when you get to my age, they actually think they ought to do something for you. So they offer to pick up stuff if you forgot to order enough milk or something.
Right.
Mm.
Amazing.
How do you
ProRev.com,
do?
folks.
What do you do? Do you walk to your grocery store,
Yeah, I'm about a block and a half away.
or
Walk there.
wear a
And they do
mask?
social distancing. And they only allow a certain number of people in at a time.
Uh-huh.
And so that there's plenty of space there. So we'll probably do another grocery. I think we're okay. We might make it until Monday. I usually get enough to last 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And then, so, we're good and comfortable.
Well, Kathy is began agitating me today to go and get some carry out at some restaurant. So think she's getting a little tired.
She wants to get carry out.
Yeah.
Well, just be careful, man.
Okay.
We have not ordered any carry out since we've been in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we will, because I don't know. Have a little trepidation about trusting others in food preparation right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That may be true.
And that's just something to think about. Because I've been trying to really figure out why so many are here in New York. I think a lot of it has to do with public transportation. I don't think these subways are safe, and some of the subway workers have been saying that. And a lot of people in New York do carry out every day, all day. And I think that may be a little bit risky too. So that's just me.
I'll throw that out.
Yeah, y'all be careful. I mean,
Okay.
But I'm
This
listening. I
is
don't
our
want Kat-
6th week. This is our 6th week.
yeah, is it 6 weeks? Yeah, but yeah, I don't want Kat to be mad at me now
Okay.
for saying what. Sam, you're wonderful. Always
Yes,
good to
sir.
talk to you.
Enjoy talking with you.
Sam, folks, check out Sam Smith, ProRev.com. Read all the latest news. He was calling himself a progressive before many of us even knew what the word meant. The Progressive Review since 1964, ProRev.com. Thank you, Sam.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.